Welcome to the RKD Group Thinkers podcast. I'm your host, Justin McCord. Here with me is Ronnie Richard. And Ronnie, very interesting conversation today with our guest. Interesting because we see kind of the idea of community in action, and it kind of takes a little bit of the sting out of the buzz of community.
I see what you did there. So our guest today is Tasha Van Vlack. She's the CEO of the Nonprofit Hive. So with the sting and the buzz, well done. So Tasha, she calls herself a community builder and a nonprofit matchmaker, and she started this community, this platform, the Nonprofit Hive, and it's for change makers to create conversations in the nonprofit space where you can match up one-to-one with somebody and just share your thoughts. And Tasha calls it her love letter to the nonprofit industry. And in our conversation, I really we talk sometimes about threads through someone's careers, and you really can see one through her career, even from her time working in the library in college, of helping people. And it's just this thread of helping people and building communities all throughout. That it was really cool to see.
You know, there's many times that I find myself in conversations with folks about professional development, and I would not classify it as a hot topic, but I would say it's a persistent topic in this sector. Where you go for it, how you make time for it, cost associated with it. And I did not realize that a part of the genesis of this project was feeling a bit of FOMO of seeing a LinkedIn explosion of activity around AFP Icon. And Tasha's going to get into that. So, to foreshadow, there are choices that as professionals that we can make sometimes of seeking out that professional development. And what I really appreciate about this platform is that it is not a heavy lift to be involved, to be active, and to build out a network, that it's a weekly opportunity to connect with someone and learn about them and maybe share a challenge that you're facing, and kind of having a little bit of a one-to-one riff. And that is super unique. It's super unique in the sector. So I also hope, Ronnie, that this is the launching off point for Tasha being known as TVV, because that's how I refer to her. And I'm the only person at this point that calls her TVV. So I need somebody else to join me in that. So without any further ado, here is the CEO of the Nonprofit Hive, TVV, Tasha Van Vlack, on the Thinkers podcast. Okay, Tasha, has anyone else started calling you TVV yet? Or is it still just me?
That is just you. But what's great is I know exactly what's happening as soon as I see TVV in a message. I don't even have to open up my phone to know who it's from in an email or a LinkedIn DM. I know who it is.
I guess I like that. I kind of don't like it, but I like it. But yeah, for sure. If you see Yo TVV, then you
know who it's from. I love that.
It's a dead giveaway.
It's a calling card. This is where we're at. This is good.
A very limited calling card because it's only me using it.
Well, you never know. This might come out, and now the nonprofit world might start calling me that.
I think so. I think this is where TVV takes off.
TVV. I like it.
Okay, so here's where I want to start.
Okay.
Biology and ESL.
Yeah. Oh no, you've gone through my LinkedIn profile. I should really almost
biology and ESL. Unpack that. You don't have to tie it to today. Just unpack younger Tasha, where you were, your interest in biology, and how, what were you planning on doing with that combo?
Yeah. I mean, this is a great conversation. We were talking about kids earlier and our children. And I mean, my poor kids are going to get an earful when it comes to secondary education, because I very much was a generalist always. I did very well in everything. And I had a high school teacher kind of be like, well, your biology marks are incredible. And that's the most applicable thing you could go to university for based on what you, when you get 90s and everything, I don't know, what do you go to school for? And, I knew people who were going through for English. I knew I didn't want to be a writer. There are other things, like I had great marks in geography. I didn't even know what you did with that. So I think biology to me was, I could be a doctor, I could, be a geneticist, I could go down that garden path. The only thing that they failed to recognize, and a Myers-Briggs would have really been useful here.
Totally helped at the time.
Because they would have been like, you are way too extroverted for anything that biologists do. And so I very quickly, in university was taking psych classes and, genetics and environmental sciences, and really just kind of throwing my hat into the ring of all the biologies and going, oh my goodness, like this is just not for me at all. There's no people. I'm doing a lot of solo projects. And so the thing I loved about university was the clubs I got into and the volunteering I did. And I worked at the local library and helped other people find books. And that was like my, I was the social person. And so I truly feel like I got led down a garden. It's like, and you've got that sunk cost. I got to finish this because I started it and was used to completing things. And I'm not sure what I would advise younger Tasha now to go like, what the heck? How did you end up, in this field? But so very random biology degree. I use it frequently to go, it's the most expensive thing I've paid for, except for my house.
It's true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So then how does ESL play into that, where
English
as a second language?
And so I think, like many of us who go into something and you're not sure what you're going to do with it, you're scrambling to make sense of a degree you now have. And so I actually was living Ottawa, so the capital here in Canada, was there for a year and took a full year graduate program in teaching English as a second language, because I thought maybe I would travel. Maybe my partner and I had been together since we were in high school. He was doing a master's he's a quantum physicist. And so he was doing more schooling, and it just felt like I needed to figure out a next step. I loved people. I loved meeting new people even back then. So this kind of, maybe the Hive was already starting and community building was already starting, but I really liked feeling like I could contribute, and newcomers to Canada was just a sweet spot where I was like, oh, this is amazing. I just felt like every day was new and the impact was high. So I kind of moved into ESL for a period of time.
Did you just say that your partner's a quantum physicist?
That is his background. Yeah. Like theoretical physics. He, just, yes, he has quite the wild career journey. He's in startup land, but in physics startups.
When y'all sit down, and now since you're both in startup land, when you sit down at the dinner table, or if it's post dinner and you're cleaning up and you're kind of trading some level of war stories from the day, whose are wilder between your startup space and and that sort of startup space?
Very different. I mean, so much of this stuff is programming related. I mean, oftentimes we just trade people stories, because I think at the core, regardless of what your industry is, it's the wild stories of messages from people that you get on the side, and the hilariously lack of resources, conversations, strategic planning, all of that is what we tend to talk about, because regardless of industry, it feels like leadership. We have a lot of like leadership based discussions, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think there's a lot of struggles with leaders.
That is eerily similar to Joanna and I. She's a principal at elementary school, and all of our conversations are people-based conversations, and the hijinks through the day. Recently, it was funny. She fielded an email, which sounds like a lot of what a lot of our time is spent doing, right? Just as professionals, but an email from a parent that was trying to express something that was kind of a complicated perspective. Ronnie, you'll feel akin to this as you and I have walked through different, like, as a parent, how do you communicate a certain thing to an education
Sure,
professional,
yeah.
principal, teacher, etc. And it was very evident as you were reading it that it was uh, from ChatGPT. Like, it was like you could just tell from the tone or lack of humanity in the message.
Yeah.
But then when you got to the end, in the email that the person had sent, there was some brackets that said, insert your student's name here, insert your name here, like at the bottom,
They
like
left it in.
they
Oh,
just copy and pasted. And it's
so
like,
precious.
oh,
Precious.
how precious. How
Yeah.
precious. Okay, so I do wonder, based off of what you just said, if the hive was already starting in your mind as you mentioned, like even the idea of being a sommelier for books, like you like
Yeah.
to help curate people's book experiences and those sorts of things, but uh you have a journey in between there to get to the hive.
Yeah.
So, like, talk us through some of the points of getting from retail into marketing, and then Tend especially, and the role that played in how you think about where you like to spend your time, where you want to spend your time.
Absolutely. And just for, because you'll find this entertaining, it's not on my LinkedIn because it's too long ago, but my first full-time job when I was no longer in school at all was for an online dating call center. And the 9 months I spent working there, let me tell you, if you want stories for the rest of your life, that was the Wild West. And it was like, what year would that be? That would have been like 2007 that I worked there.
Awesome. So
Wild.
kind of in the peak, like in
Well,
the
it's like,
pre-app, but
yeah,
like post peak
pre-app,
of the
just
website
online.
style.
You'd spend half
Yeah.
your day approving or disproving, as you might imagine, what kind of photos get uploaded. So you'd spend hours in the thousands of queues going, well, I can't post that. Can't post that. Like you'd just, it was a wild, but in terms of teaching me how to deal with people of all sorts, all conversations. I was the person that they'd like, oh, Tasha doesn't get flustered regardless of how people
Mm.
speak to her. Here you go. Here's all the difficult calls. It became my calling card, which is why I only stayed for 9 months, because I was like, this is too hard. But in between that, especially on the journey to Tend, I've always loved sales, mostly because of the people. I just like talking to people about what do they need and do I have a solution? Like that was
Mm.
always just kind of that matching of going, hey, you've got something and I've got something, and is this the right fit? And so sales has always been something I've really enjoyed, worked in, like you noted, retail. I used to be that person as a bartender who'd be like, I'd see Ronnie come in and I'd go, oh, your Bud Light's on the counter at the bar before you even sit down, because I know exactly and I remember you and I remember all the questions. So I think
Mm.
that's been a skill that everyone should work in a service facing industry. At some point, it teaches you so much. So my career's always been very service focused. And Tend was my first jump into truly the nonprofit world. We were servicing hospitals and social services. And I once went to a conference that was like the largest conference closed in on sexual assault and crisis workers in the US. And what a wild experience. But this is people's roles and this is how hard the work is. And they, compassion fatigue was an already recognized topic, but the woman I was working for, incredibly talented speaker who swore like a sailor, and it cut through everybody's bullshit that they had, where it was just like right into it. And she caught hearts and attention and really brought like tough conversations to the forefront. And so it was an incredible position. Really enjoyed it a lot. And started to make some really deep nonprofit connections then that I still have contacts with now. And so that was kind of the start of going, Man, this is a tough industry, and that's very social service focused nonprofits. Obviously, there's a wide range, but it just the lack of supports, the lack of communications between organizations was evident even then. Everyone felt like they had a unique, that this was somehow very unique to them, and that other people were doing it better. So, as you know, often frontline communications, as sales potentially came in, as like inquiries came in, the most powerful thing I usually said to somebody was, I just talked to somebody the other day who said the exact same thing as you. You're not alone. And that was like, even if I could do nothing else for them, but maybe they didn't have budget, maybe they couldn't actually bring us in, maybe they were never going to get buy-in from their leadership, but those conversations to go, you're not alone. Here's some cool resources. You should talk to this person. I started to introduce people to each other when I could. It was wild to me how isolated and siloed everyone was within the sector, especially if you couldn't attend. I know, Justin, you and I have been at AFP Icon. The majority of nonprofit professionals and fundraisers cannot go to Icon. It's
Right.
really expensive. So
Yeah.
what do they do to meet other industry peers? And I don't know that there's that many solutions out there right now.
I love that you're giving people, in the power of that phrase, you're giving people like the opportunity to be okay in wherever they're struggling.
Yeah.
Like that idea that you're not alone empowers someone, and it kind of takes a weight off just in and of itself of feeling like, okay, all right, someone's tackled this before me. Like, that you may
Yeah.
not be able to help, but just knowing that someone else has walked through this, and um, that's powerful. That's really powerful.
It is powerful. And I don't know if you've seen this trend in the sector, but I definitely hear about it a lot in private conversations and DMs is I think people are, you know, they're not against having experts, but hearing from their peers what is and isn't working is powerful. And I don't know that we're focusing in on that enough as, you know, industry leaders. I even want to say, like, I don't know that they're focusing in enough on like the everyday person. I always think of AI, and I've heard some really innovative stuff from some of our Hive members in Africa who are doing crazy things. They're never getting a platform to talk about how they've solved a pretty cool problem that they're educating others on when they get in conversation, but they're never going to be the person who probably stands up at a big conference and talks about it. But man, they sure have some pretty cool things to say. So I love being able to kind of give some voice share to people who feel often like no one's listening.
Ronnie, that hits home, I think, for me and you, because we curate a lot of events for our clients, and one of the things that we have had to reckon with is the feedback of, hey, we want more time together. And sometimes when you're curating the event, you tend to want to say, okay, but we want to talk about this to you, we want to share this with you, and there is so much good to be had from them.
Yeah, they get so excited more than anything else about getting to talk to each other and
Yeah.
share. What are you doing? What challenges are you facing? Tell me about this, and just doing that sharing, that community sharing that they have. Yeah, it's actually really cool to see. It's like you said, as much as we want to guide the experience to one thing or another, letting that happen organically is really cool. Tasha, I wanted to move forward a little bit to the next
Yeah.
step. So you're at
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
You leave 10 March of 2020.
Yeah.
We all know a little thing
I was
happened
going to say, can you
in
guess
March
what happened?
in March of
feels
2020.
it feels familiar. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you then start working with refugees, helping them settle into the area and guiding them through whatever needs they have. You
Yeah.
also, about the same time, started working with nonprofits, helping them with their tech knowledge and experience. Was there something specific about the pandemic that sparked a change, or how did you go into those
Yeah.
two areas?
Yeah. So I'm, think speaks back to my connecting roots a little bit again. March 2020, we had over $1 million worth of live training booked through Tend that disappeared instantly because it was live training. And just, all over the world, conferences booked, gone, right, in an instant. At the same time, I have 3 kiddos. The youngest at the time had just turned 4. They all of a sudden were home 24/7, and I had never worked remotely in my life. And so it took some time, took 6 months. I initially thought I'd be off for like 6 weeks. That clearly didn't happen. And so when it came time to start looking for a new role, I literally posted on my LinkedIn open to work, which at the time I barely used LinkedIn. I think I had like 200 connections on LinkedIn at that time, and posted open to work. And the wonderful team at CloudStack Services, who had done our Salesforce implementation at Tend, and I was their point person, the next day said, hey, we want you to come and work for us and do what you did for them. And so that kind of happened. I'd already committed to helping some refugee families, which, as you noted, pandemic, they arrived during the pandemic. And the family I was assigned to was from Somalia, 5 small kids, new city. They came in the winter in Canada. It's horrible. I don't know why we organize things that way, but that's what happened. And so I was their point person, and it was a wild ride. Only one family member out of all of them spoke any English at all, learning how to use Google Translate and hand your phone back and forth. And it was a wild experience. But CloudStack really, that connection to them from my previous role, they just immediately were like, how to talk to people who are trying to understand what the offering is. You were able to communicate. I was not a techie, and I think that was initially something they were concerned about. I had to learn Salesforce, and let me tell you, my sympathy level for people who were also trying to learn Salesforce, incredibly high. But that was
good product placement, by the way.
I was going to
solid product placement.
Can it work for nonprofit teams? Absolutely. I just was the person who very bluntly, and this is how I became friends with Tim Lockey, Justin, is I was on a Salesforce team, and I was that person going, why? Let's not lie to them. Let's be honest that this is going to be a really sucky 4 months. And then everyone's prepared for the crappy 4 months. And on the other side, it's sunshine and rainbows, and the sky opens, and it's going to be incredible. But I refused to lie about it. I was like, no, we're going to be honest. We're going to tell you how hard it is. And I'm going to be here, and I'm going to hold your hand because I know exactly what you're going through, because I am learning it with you at the same time. And so I started building out Salesforce training for nonprofits the way I wanted to be taught versus, as I was going through Trailhead, I was going, oh, why did they say it like this? And, pulling out what was really needed. And so kind of synthesizing information for the average non-techie nonprofiteer. And so, kind of wild journey. I'm sure there's some video somewhere me talking about introduction to Salesforce on YouTube. Don't go looking for it, but it's probably out there somewhere. And I just loved that. And that was really the start of some deep relationships with technical people in the nonprofit sector, like Tim Lockey. And it really opened my eyes to the LinkedIn community at that time and how much it was growing.
We actually have the video. Why don't you play the video, Ronnie? Go ahead and
cue it up right now.
Yeah. Joking. That would be awesome. That would be so great. That it's just on the heels of that there are, like, you're kind of hinting at throughout this conversation some of the thrusts that move towards the formation of the Hive. Was there a specific triggering event that was like, okay, now it's time?
Yes. Yeah. And yes. But I will caveat by saying I swore I would never get involved in a startup, even to work for one. I was like, no, startups are not my jam. I've always worked with small companies, but I was very much anti-startup because my husband had done a startup when our kids were little, and I was going, hell no, these things are way too hard. I'm not doing this ever. And AFP Icon 2023, Justin was probably there. Ronnie, I don't know if you were there, but lots of us in my little LinkedIn family that I'd started to build by that point were experiencing huge FOMO from our computers as we watched the pictures come up on AFP Icon. And there was a bunch of us in a background chat going, oh, I wish we were there. Like, look at that. Look at how, look at the community in action happening there. And this was even a group of us, mostly consultants, who weren't in a position to afford to go. It was in New Orleans or something like that on top of it. And my first thought was being bummed out. I couldn't afford to go. And then I was like, yeah, but what about all the people in nonprofit who really, really should be there and they can't even? They're not even having the wish that they could go because it's so out of reach. And so that was April 2023. Probably mulled it around in my head for a week going, you're not going to do this. Don't be ridiculous. Before I reached out to my technical co-founder, who's not with the Hive now, Dave Norris. And I already had like an idea between Lunch Club, which is a great platform. Not sure if you guys ever use Lunch Club. There was like Lunch Club does something similar, but it's so broad. You can't, I've talked to people from all over the world, but in insurance and teachers. And I was like, where's the spot for people in nonprofit? And did some research, and I could not find anything that was doing curated one-to-one conversations within just the nonprofit sector. And so I just said to him, like, I think we can use a lot of models that already exist out there. It doesn't have to be anything different, but it needs to be only for people in this sector. So that was April 2023. So yeah, Icon, I should probably send them a little note being like, all our FOMO started this. Yeah, it was amazing. Once it just the idea kind of took off from there. And I guess we launched our MVP a year ago last Saturday. So
Yeah.
it's just been over a year.
What does it mean? Hold on, before I get to that question, just the idea that you were resistant to joining startups and you actually started up a startup is funny, and that's like, we can't not acknowledge the irony in that.
Yeah.
What does it mean for you to be a hiver like that? Because you use that phrase quite a bit. Like, what is that? Unpack the value, not the value proposition of the platform, but like the community orientation. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it was, first of all, one of our members coined the phrase. And I can't even remember who it was because it caught on so fast that I wasn't really, we started using it, but one of our members was initially the person behind it. And I'll have to go look back because now I'm going to be wondering who that was. And to me, when I look at the people who are joining this community, it's a lot of forward thinking people in the sector who are ready to shake some shit up. And so to me, I think when I use the term hiver, I'm wanting it to be inclusive for people who are at varying stages of their careers. We have members who are on their way out, and that's why they've joined, because their plan is to give back and mentor as they leave the sector. And then we have brand new people who know a whole lot of nothing. We've started to have people join who are just interested in working at a nonprofit, and they want to pick people's brains before they make that leap. And they're asking me first before they join, and I'm going, hey, as long as you're coming, and you're not purposely trying to get hired somewhere, because we have a non-solicitation, you come, enjoy the conversations, bring your questions. Like, lots of people would like to share about their work. So it's really, to me, a hiver is one of our, someone in nonprofit who is kind of thinking to the future and going, I don't think it has to continue to be exactly like this. So what are we going to do about it? And these are people who are willing to put action behind the words as well, not just, they're willing to put their necks out there, a lot of them, to say some big things. So
what did the early days of the Nonprofit Hive kind of look like as you're starting this up, trying to get the word out to people? How did you start building that community?
So I'm a very cautious individual, even if it doesn't appear very cautious. I'm conservative in quirky areas. And one of them was I had a full-time job when this idea came about, at a organization called Yubu Digital. And I was pretty new to the role. So it was a bigger job at that point, trying to get them their marketing program launched. And my big thing was, if we can't get people on a wait list, we're not doing anything. So, and that's the conservative marketer in me going, I think this is a cool idea. I workshopped the idea around with people I admired in the sector, like Evan Wildstein, and his initial response was, well, we need this, but I don't know if nonprofits here. Like, I don't think people in nonprofit will do it. I have a video of him saying that to me, because he's like, I admire the heck out of you. I think this is brilliant. It's people in nonprofit, so they're not going to do it, right?
God, I really want you to use that as an endorsement in a marketing campaign for the Hive itself. Oh, people need this, but I don't know if they're going to do it.
Oh yeah, Evan's just like, I'm going to be honest, and he was one of my sounding board people to just, every time I had, I thought, he was so generous with his time to just go, have you met people in nonprofit? And I was like, yeah, I have, but I think they need this, right? And so he was a great sounding board for me. And the wait list grew pretty quickly. We hit 200 people, and that's when we decided to start building. So it was kind of conservative. And the first week we launched, I think we had 45 participants the first week that we actually launched last October. A lot of them are still taking chats to this day. We have a couple people who've taken like 49, 50. And this might be week 50 for 2 people. And this past Thursday, out of possible 52 weeks. So some people are like in, and they just jumped in with both feet right from the beginning. And it was the early days. I think none of us knew exactly what it was going to be, but I very much relied on people who joined to tell me what was missing. And so we went really lean on the MVP. It was like, what all do we need? We don't really need that much, because it's people in nonprofit. And I joke that we don't have a login because everyone's told me that if I force a login, they will immediately unsubscribe. So many people were like, friction. I will unsubscribe. If you force a login, I'm out. And so, just even dealing with that is its own, knowing the sector well enough to know that people are strapped and timed out. And instead, it's great. It's just an email to your inbox on Friday going, hey, do you want to participate next Thursday? If you don't, that's totally fine. You'll get invited next week, right? And so I think the flexibility has been key, knowing how nonprofit professionals function and work.
I know we've had members of our team at various stages or progressions in their career join as well. And I think that what we see is that if you can make the headspace for a once a week conversation, that there is immediate return. Like it is immediately beneficial to meet someone new, spend just a little bit of time talking about something of mutual interest, sharing a challenge, getting outside counsel, or just growing your network. Like, it is this ultimate opportunity to get out of your space and, find someone else who's trying to get out of their space for just a moment once a week. And it's fascinating how close to like therapeutic activity it is, while also fostering both professional development and building community. Like, it's all of those things in one, which is a very small needle hole to thread.
Yeah. And I've had so many conversations about community building recently with others, and why does this seem to be working? And one, we have about 500 testimonials because I have been using a tool to collect them afterwards. It's been amazing. But, so a portion of people will respond. And one of the phrases that happens again and again is, I feel seen. And because how often do you get to have a one-to-one conversation in some ways with someone who's been curated to some degree? I'm putting people who work in animal welfare together. I'm putting technical people together in the sector. I can't, just because it's almost, I'm sure you guys would appreciate this, just because I say I'm a marketer doesn't mean that I'm going to have something to talk about in the same way with someone who works at Nike's marketing department as other nonprofit marketers. It is different. You can't, you could talk maybe about the technical and some of the psychology piece, but nonprofit is different. And I think we all know it and acknowledge it. And we're also trying to ignore it sometimes because we're trying to be sustainable like a for-profit business. And so I think finding those unique spots to celebrate what it is to work in this sector. And I thought I was creating a place for people to complain about nonprofit, and that still happens. But they're also like lifting each other up and going, oh my goodness, I barely ever get to talk about what I do. This was so exciting to share my why for the work, right? So yeah, it just kind of naturally flows during the time frame, the 30 minutes.
And even going back to your time with Tend, where you were saying it was sometimes people just like hearing that there's someone else going through something. You could say the same here, like just matching up with somebody and hearing, wow, we're facing the same challenges, and but we're also so committed to what we're doing. There's power in that, I think. And not, this is going to sound a little bit like a job interview question, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like where do you see the Hive? Like what is your vision for the future? Like where does it go from here?
Oh my goodness, that's a really good question, and one that a lot of people ask, and I frequently go, I couldn't have pictured this in a year. I would have never imagined that within 6 months I would leave my full-time role because this was becoming this big. I'd never anticipated that. So I'm still kind of working on what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years, but I am excited to see the community grow. It's kind of reaching some exponential takeoff here, and we're white labeling the tool that we basically built so that it can be used in other membership-based organizations and associations, because we're seeing it as an add-on to tools like Slack communities, Mighty Networks, Circle. A lot of those groups are great, but it's still, people want that one-to-one, and I think that's really hard to find in those communities unless you have a full-time community manager, maybe. So we're looking at it as expanding it outwards. We have a couple beta testers trying it out right now for us. We really want to continue to build out resources that are by practitioners for practitioners. So our blog has really taken off. I have people got like 8 articles in the queue, all written by people within the sector about their experiences. So it's become a really powerful spot that I hadn't anticipated it growing that way. I never imagined people would just go, hey, can I write something? Okay, great. That sounds amazing, right? And we've done a series of LinkedIn Lives recently, just one about being in for-profit, moving to nonprofit. What does that transition look like? We've got one coming up next week about, our expectations of fundraisers, just completely bananas. The short answer is they absolutely are, but we could probably use that in every role. Expectations of marketers in nonprofit. Yeah, that's I'm sure we could do that one too. And so I'm really looking at it as I would like to build out a place where there's more equal voice share through the one-to-one community connections and lifting up some voices that are just not being heard in the sector, and focusing less on the expert and more on the practitioner. I think I want everyone else to be teaching me. I feel like I'm able to speak about trends just because I have this like huge community behind me telling me slowly and bringing together what the trend is, which is very, very cool. And they're just an engaged group. They're ready to push on some big changes. So I think there's an advocacy component that I'm still trying to figure out how to harness.
After all this time, TVV, you're still helping people find their book. Like you're still doing that.
Oh, thanks.
In a way, like it is. It is still helping people find their safe space, their part of the library, and their friends that are, looking to challenge the same ideas or come together. We'll be sure and drop a link to the nonprofithive.com in the show notes, and
Amazing.
strongly endorse and encourage people to be active and involved. And just really appreciate the way that you have used that triggering moment to help create a space for people to be authentic and to meet one another in a super unique way. I think it's the success of it speaks for itself, but it's sorely needed in this sector. And so thank you for leading that charge.
Thank you, guys. This was a super fun conversation. You guys are both lovely.
Well, we're on our best behavior, you know.
It's great.
Awesome.
It's super fun. I really appreciate it.
Very cool. Okay, we'll catch up with you again soon then, right?
Okay. Sounds awesome. Well, you guys are going to have to join in. Bring your knowledge to the hive.
Let's do it. Do I need to wear a bee costume?
It is optional, but you can. Absolutely.
It's on the table.
Is there a benefit to wearing a bee costume?
If you wanted to get somebody to take a selfie during your chat with you, I think the bee costume would
Okay.
probably
All right.
guarantee that they'd be willing to do that.
Future marketing material.
Exactly.